I've rewritten this post 3 times already. Every version either sounded too dramatic or too cold, and honestly, either fits what happened. People online like clean stories. Villain does crime, gets caught, learns lesson. Real life isn't like that. Real life is paperwork, insomnia, and hearing your own heartbeat while pretending to smile at security guards. Anyway, my name's William. I'm 38 now, divorced, sober for almost a year, and carrying around enough secrets to make sleep feel optional. This story happened 12 years ago, back when I still believed intelligence automatically made someone untouchable. It started with a sentence my old boss used to repeat. A fabricated dossier is a past that never happened. At the time, I thought it sounded clever. Philosophical, even. We worked in corporate risk management, which is a polished way of saying rich people hired us to dig through other people's lives. Debt records, criminal histories, lawsuits, addictions, affairs. We assembled profiles that could destroy careers before an interview even happened. And sometimes, when the money was good enough, we created profiles too. Fake histories. Invented incidents. Entire identities stitched together from believable lies. The first time I saw it happen, I felt sick. The 5th time, I helped. The 10th time, I realized nobody checks the truth if the formatting looks official enough. That realization changed me in ways I still don't fully understand. I wasn't some criminal mastermind. I was just broke. My mother's medical bills had swallowed everything I had, collectors called me daily, and I was drinking enough whiskey to blur the panic but not enough to erase it. My apartment smelled like mildew and burnt coffee. Every morning I'd sit in my car outside the office rehearsing excuses for why my rent was late again. Then a client came in with a problem. Not murder. Not drugs. Not violence. A Senate candidate. The client wanted him erased politically before the election. Quietly. No scandals that could be traced back. No obvious smear campaign. Just enough evidence to make voters uncertain. My boss turned the job down publicly. Privately, he asked if I wanted to make $50,000. I remember laughing because I thought he was joking. He wasn't. The plan was simple in theory: build a believable historical incident around the candidate from his college years. Something morally ugly but legally ambiguous. Enough to poison public opinion without triggering a full criminal investigation. A fabricated dossier. A past that never happened. And for reasons I still hate myself for, I said yes. I didn't say yes immediately. That's the part one keep replaying, like maybe hesitation counts as morality. My boss, Martin, slid a manila folder across his desk and told me to just review the possibility. That was his language for everything illegal. Possibility. Exposure. Narrative management. Corporate euphemisms designed to keep your conscience anesthetized. Inside the folder was the Senate candidate's life laid out like an autopsy. School records, old interviews, ex-girlfriends, tax documents, addresses going back 20 years. Normal opposition research at first glance. But clipped to the back was a handwritten note. Needs social destruction, not prosecution. That line sat in my stomach all night. The money was impossible to ignore. $50,000 up front. More than I'd made in an entire year. My mother's treatment had gotten worse, and 2 days earlier I'd had my electricity shut off for 6 hours because I couldn't pay the bill. I remember standing in my dark apartment thinking about how quickly principles collapse when survival walks into the room. By morning, I called Martin back. And once I did, everything started moving fast. The first thing you learn when manufacturing lies is that people only believe details that feel boring. Big dramatic accusations trigger suspicion. Small specifics make fiction breathe. Martin rented us a temporary office 2 cities over under a fake consulting company. No signs on the door, no digital trail tied to the firm. Just beige walls, stale air conditioning, and 3 laptops that had never touched our personal networks. My job was constructing the timeline. We decided the candidate had allegedly assaulted a student during a fraternity party in 1998. Not a crime dramatic enough for police archives to be heavily scrutinized, but ugly enough to survive headlines. We spent days researching the university from that year, class schedules, weather reports, old campus maps, even cafeteria menus. I'm serious. One incorrect detail can unravel an entire fabrication. The terrifying part wasn't how difficult it was. It was how easy. A forged disciplinary memo here. A scanned photograph there. Anonymous testimony written in shaky emotional language. Every piece individually weak, but together? Convincing. By the end of the week, we weren't creating evidence anymore. We were creating memory. The weakest part of any fake story is always the human element. Documents can be forged. Databases can be manipulated. But people are unpredictable. Nervous. Greedy. Emotional. One frightened witness can collapse an operation faster than bad evidence ever will. Martin solved that problem the way he solved everything, with money. He hired 2 freelancers from an online PR network, people who specialized in reputation campaigns. They never knew the full truth. Nobody ever did. One woman believed she was helping expose political corruption. The other guy didn't care as long as he got paid. I met them separately in diners and hotel bars, feeding them carefully edited pieces of the narrative. Watching strangers emotionally react to something I knew never happened messed with my head more than I expected. The woman actually cried while reading the fake testimony. That should have stopped me. Instead, I doubled down. I started rehearsing conversations in the mirror, preparing for investigators, reporters, anyone who might question inconsistencies. Sleep became impossible. Every sound outside my apartment felt like police already coming for me. But underneath the fear was something worse. Pride. The dossier looked flawless. We never planned to release the dossier directly. That would have looked suspicious. Instead, Martin arranged for it to appear anonymously through a small political blog known for publishing unverified scandals. From there, larger outlets would pick it up while distancing themselves from responsibility. That's how modern destruction works. Nobody owns the lie, so nobody feels guilty spreading it. The night before the leak, Martin invited me to a hotel room downtown to review everything one final time. I remember the television humming quietly while we checked timestamps, signatures, metadata. Tiny details most people never notice. At around midnight, Martin looked at me and said, "Once this goes live, there's no undoing it." I nodded like I understood. Truthfully, I was already panicking. The story broke the next morning at 8:14 a.m. By noon, the candidate's name was trending everywhere. News stations replayed the allegations nonstop. Comment sections filled with outrage before anyone verified a single fact. And then came the moment that still haunts me most. I watched the candidate deny everything live on television. And for 1 second, I actually believed him. The problem with lies is that once they enter the world, they stop belonging to you. People reshape them. Add details. Invent motives. Complete strangers started remembering incidents connected to the candidate. Former classmates appeared online claiming he'd always been aggressive or arrogant. None of it came from us, but somehow the false story kept growing on its own. That should have made me feel safe. Instead, it terrified me. 3 days after the leak, an investigative journalist contacted the university directly and discovered inconsistencies in one of our forged disciplinary forms. Nothing catastrophic yet, just formatting issues from the wrong administrative template year. But small mistakes attract attention. Martin stayed calm. Too calm. He told me reporters chase momentum, not truth. By the time facts arrive, he said, people already made emotional decisions. Still, I started carrying burner phones separately from my real one. I deleted old emails compulsively. I even stopped sleeping at my apartment for a few nights because paranoia convinced me surveillance vans were outside. Then the woman we hired, the freelancer who cried reading the testimony, called me unexpectedly. and she sounded scared. I answered from a gas station outside Newark because I'd started avoiding calls at home. The woman, her name was Elise, skipped introductions completely. She said a reporter had contacted her asking questions about the testimony she helped circulate online. At first she stuck to the script we gave her, but then the reporter mentioned something strange. The alleged victim didn't exist. Not fully, anyway. We had built the identity from fragments of real students who attended the university in the late 90s. Different names, different records, stitched into one believable person. Enough digital residue to survive casual scrutiny, but apparently not enough for someone digging deeper. Elise kept asking me if the story was actually true. I lied automatically. I told her powerful people were trying to suppress evidence. Told her journalists were being manipulated. I sounded convincing too, which honestly scared me more than her questions. Before hanging up, she said something I still remember clearly. "You don't sound angry. You sound afraid." And she was right. Because for the first time, I realized this thing could collapse publicly. And if it did, I'd be the easiest person to sacrifice. Martin reacted exactly the way seasoned predators do when things become dangerous. He simplified the problem into percentages. "Most scandals survive 72 hours. He told me over whiskey in his office. After that, people defend whichever version they emotionally invested in. I wanted reassurance. Instead, he gave me statistics. The campaign had already taken serious damage. Sponsors were backing away from the candidate. Poll numbers were dropping. Publicly, the accusations were still unconfirmed. But online, that distinction barely mattered anymore. Then Martin handed me another assignment. We needed supporting evidence. Not new documents, witnesses. He wanted me to pressure an old college acquaintance of the candidate into confirming parts of the story anonymously. The man had gambling debts and a prior DUI. Enough leverage to make cooperation likely. That was the moment everything stopped feeling abstract. Forged paperwork is distant. Manipulating a real person face-to-face is different. Personal. Ugly. I drove 2 hours to meet the guy at a roadside bar near Philadelphia. The entire trip my hands shook against the steering wheel. Not because I feared getting caught. Because I knew exactly what I was becoming. The guy's name was Raymond. Mid-50s, exhausted-looking, smelled like cigarettes and old beer even from across the booth. The kind of man who carried regret in his posture. He already knew why I was there before I sat down. People in debt recognize pressure immediately. I didn't threaten him directly. That's important. Real coercion is quieter than movies make it seem. I mentioned his unpaid gambling accounts. His probation history. The possibility that reporters might connect him to certain financial issues if his name surfaced publicly. Then I offered the alternative, a short anonymous statement supporting the candidates. History of violent behavior. Raymond stared at me for a long time without speaking. Finally he asked, "Did he actually hurt somebody?" I should have lied instantly. Instead I hesitated. That tiny pause answered the question for him. He stood up so abruptly the table shook, pointed at me, and said something I still hear sometimes when I wake up at night. "You people don't ruin lives because you hate someone. You do it because it's profitable." Then he walked out. And for the first time since this started, I seriously considered disappearing. After the meeting with Raymond, paranoia stopped being occasional and became constant. Every unknown number felt dangerous. Every stranger looking at me too long in public made my pulse spike. I started checking mirrors while driving to see if anyone followed me. Rationally, I knew most of it was guilt manifesting as fear, but once your brain enters survival mode, logic becomes background noise. Martin, meanwhile, acted untouched. He kept insisting the operation was succeeding. Poll numbers continued dropping, donors were withdrawing support, and news channels had shifted from asking whether the accusations were true to discussing the political fallout. That's how narratives harden. Eventually consequences become more important than facts. Then things got worse. Elise disappeared. No answers to calls. No replies to encrypted messages. Nothing. Martin claimed she'd probably panicked and left town, but his tone changed when he said it. Sharper. Controlled. I realized he was worried too. 2 nights later, I came back to my apartment and found the hallway door slightly open. Nothing inside looked stolen. But my desk drawers had been searched. And sitting in the center of my kitchen table was a single printed photograph of the Senate candidate smiling with his family. There was no note attached to the picture. That somehow made it worse. If someone wanted to threaten me, why stay silent? Why break into my apartment just to leave a family photograph on my kitchen table? The message felt personal, almost surgical. Like whoever entered understood fear doesn't come from violence alone, it comes from uncertainty. I called Martin immediately. He sounded annoyed more than concerned. Asked if anything was stolen. Asked whether I told anyone about the operation. Then he said something that chilled me. If someone wanted you exposed, you'd already be exposed. That wasn't comforting. That sounded like experience. I barely slept that night. Around 3 a.m., I started drinking again after nearly 6 months sober. Whiskey dulled the panic enough for me to think clearly, which is probably the most dangerous thing alcohol ever did for me. The next morning, the story exploded nationally. A major news network published an investigation claiming parts of the dossier were fraudulent. Experts questioned signatures, timelines, administrative records. The word fabricated started appearing everywhere. And suddenly everyone involved began looking for someone else to blame. Once the investigation aired, the entire operation started tearing itself apart in real time. Political commentators who spent days condemning the candidates suddenly shifted into self-protection mode. Reporters blamed anonymous sources. Bloggers deleted posts. Public outrage transformed into cautious uncertainty almost overnight. Martin vanished completely. His office lease terminated the same day the story broke nationally. Phone disconnected. Emails dead. It was like he'd rehearsed disappearing long before any of this happened. Which meant one thing. I was expendable from the beginning. 2 federal investigators came to my apartment 3 days later. Not aggressive, not dramatic. Calm men in dark suits asking careful questions while pretending they already knew the answers. I denied everything. And I was good at it too. That's the part one hates admitting. I lied smoothly. Naturally. Years of corporate manipulation had trained me well enough to sound offended by accusations I absolutely deserved. But then one investigator placed a printed bank transfer on my table. $50,000 routed through shell accounts connected to Martin. My name sat directly beneath the transaction. And in that moment, I understood the difference between fear and inevitability. I lasted 6 hours before asking for a lawyer. 12 before considering cooperation. People imagine betrayal as some dramatic emotional moment, but honestly, exhaustion plays a bigger role than morality. By then I hadn't slept properly in weeks. My nerves were shredded, my drinking had started again, and Martin had abandoned me without hesitation. The prosecutors knew it too. They offered a deal carefully designed to sound humane, reduce charges in exchange for full testimony about the fabrication campaign and everyone connected to it. No guarantees about prison time, but enough hope to make refusal feel suicidal. I kept thinking about my mother. She still believed I worked in ordinary consulting. She used to brag about me to nurses during treatment appointments. That memory hurt more than the investigation itself. So I talked. Everything came out over 2 days: fake records, burner phones, shell companies, witness manipulation. The prosecutors recorded every word while I slowly dismantled the illusion I helped build. And the strangest part? Confession felt physically relieving. Not emotionally. Not morally. Just quiet. Like carrying a body for months and finally setting it down, even knowing you'll still be punished for dragging it there in the first place. I avoided major prison time. That sentence alone probably makes some people hate me already. Because compared to the damage we caused, my punishment felt small: 18 months in a minimum security federal facility, financial penalties, probation afterward, permanent professional disgrace. The prosecutors emphasized my cooperation repeatedly during sentencing, as if honesty at the end somehow balanced dishonesty at the start. The Senate candidate never fully recovered politically. Even after the dossier was exposed as fraudulent, suspicion lingered around him like smoke after a fire. Some people still believed parts of it. That's another ugly truth nobody talks about. Once a lie becomes emotionally useful, evidence rarely kills it completely. During sentencing, the judge asked if I felt remorse. I said yes. And I meant it. But remorse is complicated when mixed with self-preservation. Was I sorry because I destroyed an innocent man's reputation, or because I finally experienced consequences myself? I still don't know. Prison itself wasn't violent or cinematic. Mostly silence, routines, fluorescent lights, and too much time inside your own thoughts. That ended up being worse than punishment. It forced me to meet myself honestly. I've been out for almost 7 years now. Most people from my old life disappeared quietly. Some out of disgust, others out of self-protection. Corporate scandal spreads like contamination. Nobody wants proximity once consequences become public. Sometimes strangers still recognize my name online. Usually in comment threads discussing political misinformation or fabricated media campaigns. A few call me evil. A few call me a scapegoat. Both are probably partially true. But this is what I actually learned. Destroying someone rarely feels dramatic while you're doing it. It feels procedural. Administrative. Tiny decisions stacked carefully on top of each other until suddenly another human being's reality collapses under the weight of your convenience. That's the danger. Nobody wakes up wanting to become a monster. You drift there through rationalizations. Debt. Ego. Fear. Ambition. You convince yourself survival excuses corruption. It doesn't. If anyone reading this is standing near a decision that requires lying, just once, for money, power, or protection, understand something clearly. The hardest part isn't getting caught. The hardest part is realizing how easily you adapted to becoming someone capable of it.